Welcome to the Benefits Buzz, a WEX podcast. Today we're diving into the versatile world of health savings accounts, uncovering how they serve spenders, savers, investors, and newcomers alike. We'll explore some real-world stories and share expert advice to empower you and your employees to make informed decisions for better health and financial security. For more insights, please visit our HSA Day webpage at wexbenefitsyou.com/HSA Day. So we are joined today by four esteemed guests. Jason Cook, Vice President of Healthcare Emerging Markets, will discuss emerging trends in the healthcare financing. Julie Natale, Senior Manager of Product Marketing and our expert on investing, offers insights into maximizing HSAs for long-term financial growth. Svare, Readiness Manager for Customer Service, will discuss her dual role as a spender and saver and offer us some tips on optimizing HSA benefits for immediate and future needs. And coming in fourth, but certainly not last, is Lance Taylor, Custom Marketing Manager and a newcomer to HSAs. He's going to share his perspective on what he's learned about tailoring his HSA to meet his needs. Welcome to the show, everyone.
Yeah, welcome. Don't be shy. We've got a fun episode planned. You can see Nathan, I'm repping my HSA Day shirt. We're celebrating HSA Day on October 15th. A fun way to, grow education, grow awareness, and the power around HSAs. And I love this year's episode, Nathan, because this is our 5th or 6th year celebrating HSA Day and the Special Benefits Buzz episode. And usually we have a great time bringing on what I would say influencers in the industry talking about HSAs, but I love that we've gone back to the roots and talked to the people who are using HSAs and hearing their stories, because I think people want to learn from other people who are just trying to figure out what is this beautiful HSA that I have, right?
Couldn't agree with you more, Eric. HSAs are just near and dear to my heart, and I know they're near and dear to a lot of folks' hearts. So I'm just super excited that we've got such a great panel that we can actually get some insights from you to share with our listeners, and I know it's really going to resonate. So I'd really like to kick us off by having each of you share a little bit about how you currently use your HSA and how your approach has impacted maybe your health and financial security. Julie, as our investor, would you mind kicking us off?
Sure thing, Nathan, and thanks everybody for having me. I'm primarily an investor with my HSA, so I use it as an investment account, focusing on long-term growth rather than immediate medical expenses. And to support this strategy, I take advantage of supplemental offerings from my employer, things like an accident policy. And my son recently broke his thumb, and instead of dipping into my HSA balances, I was able to submit a claim through my accident policy. I also take advantage of point solutions that provide mental health and well-being programs. So these additional coverages help keep my family healthy and protect us from unexpected costs, which allows me to grow my HSA balances strategically.
I love it. Way to be strategic. That's the best part of this HSAs we're going to hear, is that everyone uses it just a little differently, and there's no right or wrong way to use your HSA. And so I think when we hear your stories, it's great to start with you, Julie. Susan, I believe you're next. We'd love to hear a little bit more from you.
Yeah, I am more of a spender, so I tend to use my HSA as a tool that allows me and my family to pay our medical, dental, and vision expenses without tapping into our personal savings accounts. It actually acts kind of like an automatic budgeting tool. I know that money is sitting there for those uses, and because of how I use it, I tend to fall kind of both into the savings and the spending categories. I'm not as interested at this point in my life in an investment tool, but it's a way for me to set aside funds for expenses that I know will be coming. I have a kid on the way, so we don't have to worry about finding ways to pay bills when they come due. I just know those funds are there.
Well, Suze, congratulations on your soon-to-be bundle of joy. And it's very exciting to get some really good insights on, the practical day-to-day use of an HSA, especially with a growing family. Lance, can we kick it over to you? Can you talk a little bit about your experience with your HSA and how you found it to work well for you?
Yeah, so I'm kind of in the same bucket as Sue's. I'm a new user to HSA, so I've always had it when I started here, but I'm still learning a lot more of what it's capable of. So I am not only here to share my experience of being a saver and a spender, but I'm also here to learn a lot about investing as well.
That's outstanding. And certainly never least, but in this instance last, Jason, could you take just a moment? I realize that you may not be one of our personas necessarily because you're the expert in the room. So could you tell us a little bit about what you're bringing to the table in today's show?
Yeah, I appreciate that, Nathan, but not a self-proclaimed expert. I'm just a guy who's had an HSA for 17 years. I've been in the business for 17 years. And so, my perspective is that, I didn't really have a choice in 2007 when I opened my first HSA. I left a completely different industry, didn't think about benefits, went to go work for a startup technology company that was providing an HSA administrative platform. And so the one plan that they offered was a high deductible health plan with an HSA. And so the first thing I realized was that I could not believe how much my previous employer was charging me for insurance, right? That was the number one. So I was going traditional to an HSA eligible plan. And I realized for the first time how overinsured I really was. And so, that's the cost savings was super impactful for me back then. Now with, next step was to figure out how this thing works. And I think that the one thing that I did wrong was that I didn't engage with my account early on. The first thing I did was I did an IRA to HSA distribution. So I had some money to cover my deductible. And I didn't log into my account for about another 2 years. And the account was being funded. And I didn't pay attention to it until I changed jobs in 2009 and went to go work for a bank in the banking side of the HSA business. But I went to go transfer my HSA and went to roll it over. And I realized, wow, this is actually meaningful money in this account after 2 years. And I think that's a very important lesson that I think employers need to be talking about. Talk about the tax benefits, great, but also talk about the engagement and the importance of employees actually utilizing their account.
I love that, Jason. Thank you so much. I think it's very important to remember just how versatile is really the key word when it comes to HSAs, and that we all start when we first have one with maybe not knowing all the ins and outs and not really knowing what we're going to do with it or where we can take it. And then over time, we learn all of the different ways that we can really leverage it in our lives to be this huge benefit. And I'm just really excited to talk through some of that with everybody. For myself, I do have an HSA. I am a proud HSA holder. And I continue to work little by little. I am the incremental investor at this point. But I certainly started the first time I had a high deductible health plan without having any understanding of the HSA, which really ties me right into you, Lance, as we talk about maybe that HSA that we own, but we might be underutilizing. Can you talk to us a little bit about what's held you back from fully utilizing your HSA, or what you think might be impacting other employees who hesitate to use their HSA?
Yeah, I think me and other employees might align that there's just a wealth of knowledge on everything an HSA can do. And even when you go and find all that knowledge, which one actually applies to me and which one applies to my scenario. So even when I got started with an HSA, I didn't know whether to sign up for an HSA or an FSA or what was best in my solution. And I didn't learn until I went to a career fair or a virtual health fair. And that, pinned it down to an HSA. And then after that fair, I had a ton more questions. And when I start to look them up, there's just a bunch of words, a bunch of terms I don't know. And when you ask for information, you get sent to a big old library and it's like, okay, where do I begin? So I would say what's keeping me from, fully understanding and utilizing my HSA is just how much or what the capabilities my HSA has, and then which one of those pertain to me.
Lance, just know that you're in very good company. When I first started with my HSA, overwhelming was probably the word that most resonated with the HSA. Is just so much, and I didn't understand all the ins and outs. Jason, that I'm gonna pick on you. Since employees can feel like their HSA is a little bit overwhelming, especially when they're new to it, how can newer employees to the HSA start using their HSA effectively right off the jump, right away?
Right off the jump. Yeah, jumping off a cliff is sort of what it feels like for some employees, right? When they go from a traditional plan to an HSA eligible plan with with an HSA, because you're more responsible, right? Think about it as sort of self-insurance. You're self-insuring yourself against future medical expenses. And, it's important to be engaged, like I said. So employers really need to push employees to pay attention to the account itself, right? See that they're growing their balances, understanding, what monthly cash flow is, right? So whoever the account holder may be might not realize that they actually have a little bit more cash flow left at the end of each month that could be deposited into the HSA. And, we think about, security and financial security, and we talk about investments a lot, but the fact of the matter is roughly 50% of accounts out there across the entire ecosystem have a balance of less than $500. So these are the people that we really need to talk about and, really communicate the importance of engagement. And it's not just engagement at open enrollment, it's year-round engagement. And that's really how, people learn things. I mean, it's saying the same thing over and over and over again, and then it finally clicks. And then people can start utilizing their account more effectively.
I love that you talked about the fact that it really is personal responsibility. And there is, it seems, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but there is a real sense that you have to have a personal responsibility to your own education with regard to the HSA, figuring out what your balances need to be, what your expenses actually look like year to year. Would you say that's a fair way of looking at it, Jason?
Yeah, it's a very fair way to look at it, right? I mean, set goals. I mean, if somebody opens an HSA this open enrollment, so we're talking, it's hard to believe, but right, 2025 open enrollment, set some goals. I don't think anybody expects that new user to become an investor day one, but if someone wants to move along to investments, set some of those goals to hit that cash threshold to start to be able to invest.
That's a great suggestion. Thank you, Jason. I think a lot of us, it's usually, I'm just a guy who's in an HSA for 5 years, so I'm not nearly as much as 17. That's the soundbite of the podcast so far, by the way. I'm just a guy who's at an HSA for 17 years. That should be in your bio if it's not right now. Just a marketing tip. So we love your feedback. Thank you. And Lance, I totally get, right? This is brand new. There's a flurry of acronyms. I don't know. It's a lot to unpack. And so I really appreciate your insights, Jason. I felt the same thing that Nathan did, right? When you're open that, how do I make sure I'm maximizing this? Lots to get your arms around. Susan, I want to focus a couple questions on you a little bit. You kind of self-identified as like a spender or maybe saving when you can. And by that, I'm assuming you mean like you're getting so many HSA funds from an employer, right? They're putting dollars in your HSA for you. And then I'm assuming I'm going to give you a chance to kind of elaborate, but I'm assuming you're putting dollars then on a monthly basis into your HSA. And then I'll let you elaborate here with this open-ended question. Are you spending on like HSA eligible items? Are you using those dollars for doctor visits? You mentioned you've got a child and one on the way. Are you thinking about those expenses? I would just let our listeners know, how are you using your HSA? How are you funding it? And so we can get a feel.
Yeah, so I'm kind of in a unique situation that I am the insurance holder in our family. I work for WEX. My husband works for a company that will also put money into his HSA if he's on a high deductible health plan. So we both have HSAs, both being funded by employer and by us, and that's quite the balancing act. There are, like I said, 3 people in my family with a 4th on the way. It'll be about a week after this airs that I'll be headed off to the hospital. So it's a lot of medical expenses. Our family is, as a whole, neurodivergent as well. So we're really careful that we take care of our mental health. We attend therapy. Our medications are important to us. Being pregnant also just means a lot of expenses for care. Ultrasounds, regular doctor visits. Some of them are covered under the preventative, some of them aren't. So the biggest challenge for me has been keeping up with what's owed for each member of the household, which HSA is currently funded. Like, do we want to save one of them and invest it? Do we want to, which company has the better investing options? Which, obviously WEX, I'm biased a little bit, but where are we going to pull those funds from? So that's kind of been my use of like, we have to spend them a lot. We have a lot of medical expenses. We have prescriptions. We have an accident-prone 5-year-old. She takes after her mother.
I can relate.
She got all my grace, which is to say, 0. So that's been for us of the balancing act of, yeah, it's hard to know how much do you fund, where do you fund, and how can you still have that buffer in there while experiencing a lot of medical expenses on the monthly.
Yeah, for sure. And I love in your answer, you gave some great examples of great opportunities to use HSA funds. We know if you think of yourselves if having those dollars set aside for those exact reasons. So, Jason, I love, you get to sit back here and listen to these different ways in which people use their HSAs. And then, I love to get your thoughts on, Sue's someone out there who's spending, right? The dollars are coming in, they're spending. What's any suggestions on how to figure out or monitor what to spend on, or when to spend, or, just suggestions on those that like to go back to their HSA on a regular basis for those expenses that happen throughout the year?
Yeah, I think the most important thing to understand is that this is not a linear path from point A to point B, right? We talk about pathways and we talk about these various personas, but it's not, you can set goals, but life is life and things get moved around, right? And so, there's been years where I've been a pure investor and I have been invested in the market. But I'll tell you, it was, 2 years ago, I've got 4 kids between 10 and 14, and all 4 of them got slapped with braces within a year and a half.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
I became a hybrid. That was a lot. And I can't believe how much money these guys are making that are throwing braces on our kids. Good for them.
I know. I tell my kids to be an orthodontist when they grow up. So
exactly. I mean, it's like it's a true. Anyway, I could talk for hours about that. But anyway, I became a hybrid, so I was spending a little bit, and I was actually taking the distribution to cover some unexpected big monthly cash flow expenses. So it's personal for everybody. I said it a million times. No one employee is in the same life stage or financial situation. So it's very personal to that account holder to make sure that they are, using the account in the most efficient way for them personally.
Yeah, that's great. I love that feedback. Susan, I'm gonna throw this back to you. In the event, right? So you've got some major things happening in your life soon. For those listening, as a reminder, your HSA funds do not expire at the end of the year. You can carry them over. So in that mentality, you can think about saving. You can think about your HSA account as a place to save dollars in the event maybe your spending is down, and maybe you can save for a large event, right? That's coming up in your life. So have you thought about that? Have you leveraged saving or keeping dollars for major life events, i.e. a child or anything else? Or has your mentality been, I don't have the luxury right now yet. Right now, I've got expenses coming in, right? Whether it's be therapy, or whatever it might be, and those take up my funds. I'd love to hear your situation with saving if you had a chance to do that at all.
Yeah. For us, we knew that we were planning on having a child in 2024. So we actually just went back to a high deductible health plan this benefit year. So the last couple of years we've been on a traditional plan, knowing that we have those regular maintenance things going on, that the traditional plan was better for, because they happened every week, every other week, etc. Now knowing that we were going to be using, having these big expenses, we were going to have a baby, we were going to have a pregnancy, using it as a savings account so that we could have the lower premiums and take advantage of, in our cases, great employer contributions, allowed us to kind of start setting it early in the year. I wasn't pregnant in January, wasn't pregnant in February. That let us start building up that savings account because we knew we would have to meet our deductible. Having a child, I think when I had my first one 5 years ago, it was $80,000. Thankfully, we also had an HSA then. I was not
Did you say $80,000?
80. The total billed amount between all of my pregnancy and the births was $80,000.
Wild.
So having the ability to know early in the year, I'm like sweating thinking about that. I don't know if you can see it.
Yep. Deep breaths.
I'm sweating thinking about it.
And, But just being able to know that we could start setting funds aside early in the year to build up that buffer. So we weren't having to pay out of, I mean, our savings account has not been touched this entire year because we had the HSA funds built in. We knew it was coming.
Yeah, I love that. And whether it's 80K or whatever it ends up being, right? Those big things. I love the idea. And one of the things that I love about HSA is you can save, whether that's something that you know, like, hey, we're going to start a family, right? But you also know I've got an accident prone child and I've been to the ER 3 times in the last 18 months. So I know, right, that I want to have pockets of dollars saved up for those unexpected things. Jason, there's got to be a smart strategy here when it comes to saving. There's long-term goals, right? The long-term advantages of saving for those types of things. Have you seen anything with your experience with HSAs on maybe some tips on the power of saving for that?
I'll go back to cash flow. I mean, everybody who has an HSA should understand what their monthly cash flow is and then maximize the contributions. And, there's a variety of strategies. You think about, one that's talked about in the industry, for the folks that have, the financial wherewithal to, fully fund the 401k up to the employer max and toggle over to the HSA and fully fund that and then go back to the 401k. I mean, people like that, it's about, little by little, and it's about over time, right? This is not a plan your decision. This is a lifetime account. This is going to operate very much like an IRA when folks retire. And so it's taking a long-term view of this. Like, you're not going to, swap out next year. You're not going to renew your HSA. Your HSA is open until you close it or roll it over. So take that long-term approach. If you can invest, I would recommend dollar cost averaging your HSA. I mean, that's, sweeping funds over on a regular basis across, an allocation model that's pre-established.
That's great. A little bit of dollars each month can go a long way, right? I think that's what sometimes the thought is, I've got all these expenses. How can I ever dream of having money to save in there? I think there's just smart. I've just heard tons of stories about just putting a small amount of dollars, right? That you can, whatever you can contribute, and that stuff adds up over time so that you're prepared for that unexpected cost.
I really appreciate you pointing that out, Eric, that the small amount over time. We hear that with the 401k, and I think people often forget that a health savings account is also a retirement vehicle. It does have some very real efficacy with regard to not only paying for medical expenses in retirement, but once you hit 65, everything that you've saved in your HSA can be used for any expense that you'd like. And again, that's still with those triple tax savings. Meaning that you can invest tax-free and that your investments can be withdrawn tax-free, which brings us to the person that I am aspiring to be. Julie, you are an investor. How did you start investing your funds? What was your strategy? Tell us kind of how you got from, here's this new health savings account that's been given to me, to how you got to where you're at today, where you're actively investing funds.
Sure. Well, I don't know if I'm an expert, but I'll just say this, my strategy works for me. So I started investing in my HSA funds with kind of a longer term strategy in mind. In the first couple of years, I took some calculated risks by focusing on keeping my family healthy, knowing that this would allow me to build a financial cushion in our HSA. So my goal was to ensure that by the time we might need to dip into those funds and say like years 3 or beyond, we would have already have met our out-of-pocket max deductible so that those funds would be there. My employer also has a tool that's called My HSA Planner, and that allows you to put your inputs in, and then it plans out what your inputs might look like over time. So that's also a great tool that I was able to take advantage of. Each year, I try to maximize the amount that I contribute to my HSA so that I can build that solid nest egg by the time I retire. Well, the other thing too is my employer also contributes to my HSA annually, so that helps compound the amount I'm investing.
Sure.
This approach has allowed me to grow my HSA balances strategically by providing both that safety net for some of those unexpected healthcare expenses, but also a significant boost to my long-term financial security. And over time, it's worked. But I would say for me, it was getting through those first 3 years so that I could make sure that even if we had some unexpected event, that money was in there. And now we've built that up. So now it's solely just investments. And the other thing I'll say, this is the last point I'll hit on. Each year we come up to open enrollment, we have some choices to make. You're going to have some sort of money taken out for your medical expenses. So if you look at what you did in the year before and you say, well, I'm going to start to put that yearly calculation away each month, then you can start to do that as just like, here's what my bottom line baseline would be. And then over time, once you start to build your HSA balances, then you can say, okay, maybe I'm going to add more to the point where you can max it out. And that's what I'm doing today. And this has been about probably I'm on my like 5th year of an HSA. So.
Now, how savvy an investor are you, Julie, if you don't mind me asking? Are you in there all the time, moving funds around and trying to get the absolute last cent, or do you pretty much just let it go and say, hey, these are in a mutual fund, I'm going to let it do its thing?
Well, that's a great question, Nathan. I have a financial advisor. So my financial advisor and I go over this together because I have somewhat of a complicated tax situation. Not everybody does. But the great piece about this is that you can get as in the weeds as you want about your investments or not. And they have some great opportunities where you could just select a fund and let it ride. And so what I do is I'm a little bit of both, because what I do is I talk to my own financial advisor who helps to guide me in certain things as it relates to the environment, macroeconomics, etc. And then I look at that and use that to like how I select. I'm not in there every day selecting different funds to do, but I've got the one that works for me.
So is it fair to say then you don't think you have to be a super savvy investment baker to be comfortable enough to start investing with your HSA?
That's an accurate statement. You could be as new of a user as Lance is and still do a great job. And I would say, again, I don't know what other companies out there have a similar tool, but my company has a tool called My HSA Planner, and I highly recommend it. It is a way to really track what you can do and make some sound decisions based on that.
Jason, talk to us a little bit about some of the rewards that may come from investing in HSA funds. Again, asking for a friend.
Asking for a friend. So, I mean, the market may appreciate, right? So net asset value appreciation of what you got invested. I mean, it's important to look at what the interest rate is being paid on the cash component of the HSA, because it typically pays something that's comparable to a checking account. And if you're taking that long-term vision, that long-term strategy that I talked about, that's not going to be enough. And the market's going to go up and down. That's out of that, it's out of everybody's control, right? The market's happened to be up this year. A couple of years ago, it was down. But if you take that long run approach of dollar cost averaging and you're continuously putting money into your investment positions, you're buying at highs and you're buying at lows, and so it smooths out the risk.
That's good. Good investing. I'm on my way as well. And I'm a this 2045 fund looks great. I'm going to click that one and set it and forget it and hope the market does what it's supposed to do and trust the portfolio managers that they're smarter than I. But again, that's the beauty of these things, right? You can choose however you want to. I'm unsavvy as well. This has been fun. I love this conversation. Panelists, I'm kind of looking at you. A lot of you are nodding, and I love this because I like to say we randomly chose, but let's be true, people. We strategically chose because you all use it a little bit differently. And I think that variety brings great perspective to our listeners. And so now that you've kind of heard how other people have used it, and probably in preparation, don't know that we were going to pepper you with questions about your HSA usage as well. I'd love to know, after this dialogue and thinking more about your HSA, how maybe you might think about how, one, you'll continue to use how you've been doing, or do you have a way you like to evolve how you're going to use your HSA? Maybe Lance, I'll start with you, just because, right? You kind of fell into I have an HSA. I'm not quite sure. I know it's there. I kind of want to start using it. So based on all this dialogue, Lance, what's your vibe? How do you think you want to approach your HSA moving forward?
Yeah, so outside of just spending it on, like the yearly, cough season stuff as that approaches, I'm very excited to kind of grow forward in investing. See how it does with some of my other investing portfolios, compare and contrast, and see how my HSAs can, stack up to those.
That's solid. That's a good plan, right? Baby steps, as they say. I think that's great. And again, those who are listening, I think it's important to clarify, not every organization provides an investing opportunity. We recommend you are able to be with an organization that provides that. It's a huge opportunity. So if you're like, I don't know if I can invest in mine, that's one thing to check out immediately, because it's a huge advantage if you haven't yet. Suze, let's go to you. My spender saver with a child on the way. What are your thoughts moving into next year?
Yeah. Being that we're kind of back new to being on a high deductible health plan and having an HSA, I knew that this year was going to be a spending year. Hopefully, going into having, no more pregnancies down the road, that I'm going to be able to start saving that up a little bit more. We'll still have medical expenses. We'll still have, me or my oldest that like to fall up the steps, but being able to start kind of taking advantage more. When we first had an HSA, my partner and I were very young. We were like, great, free money, employer contributions only. And now we're a little bit more savvy, and once this high expense year is over, we're hoping to start being a little bit more mindful with where we're putting things and building towards that investment option.
Yeah, I love that. Smart, right? I think the HSA can evolve as you evolve through your life, right? Through the journeys of life, right? Which I think is great, and you can use it in different ways. So great example of that, right? Last but not least, Julie, you've got a good game plan going. I'm curious if there's any more left to elevate your HSA game.
I think there's some left. So my future plans for my HSA will remain focused on using it as a long-term investment account. However, as I get closer to my retirement age, the way that my strategy will evolve will be based on economic factors and my own personal risk tolerance. So I'll continue to review my asset allocation to ensure that it aligns with my financial goals and the remaining years I have left in the workforce. But while I'm currently focused on growth-oriented investments, I might gradually shift to more conservative growth options as I approach my retirement age so that I can preserve the funds that I've built up. Ultimately, my goal is still to have a nest egg that I can support my healthcare needs and financial security in retirement.
I am so impressed by how personal the HSA can be, and how it really does work for meeting you wherever you're at in your life cycle. And it's just really, I don't know, it's pretty cool. As we look to kind of start wrapping up the episode here, we often like to ask people what they would like to share, what insights they might have, what kind of talking point they'd like to embrace. So I'm going to start with you this time, Jason. What's one piece of advice that you wish you had received about an HSA when you first started with one 17 years ago?
Great point.
17 years ago. Yeah, you're making me think back a long time now. Making me feel old. All right, this is great. So the one piece of advice, I honestly, I would say I wish I, had advice from my previous employer, letting me know that this benefit existed. To be honest with you, I don't even know if my previous employer, and was going back to 01 to 07, HSAs came about in 2004, the first account started to open, but nobody talked about the benefits of, tax sheltered health accounts. Everybody talks about the benefits of retirement, the benefits of getting your 401k match. Nobody talked about the benefits, both rational and emotional benefits that an HSA provides. And so I wish my dad talked to me about that when he was telling me, hey, you're going to be a knucklehead if you don't get your 401k employer contribution. He wasn't saying like, hey, check out these tax sheltered health accounts. They're really going to benefit you over the long term. So that would be my one piece of advice. People just need to start talking about these more.
That is a great piece of advice, to talk about it more. All right, now I'm intrigued. Same question. Suze, what's the one piece of advice you wish you'd received about HSAs when you first started?
Is it an option to just copy and paste Jason's?
Don't be a
So
knucklehead.
when I started, yeah. When I started, I interviewed at WEX 11 years ago. The first question they asked me was, "Do you know what an HSA is?" And I went, "No," because I had no idea. I was 18. I was working retail. I just wanted out of the retail game, and my sister happened to work at WEX and was like, "Hey, apply." But I really wish that I had had more education as I was becoming a young adult. You know, I even mentioned like my partner and I, as we started contributing at first, it was like, oh yeah, it's great. The employer puts money in there. But much like a 401k, it's like the earlier you start it, the better your compounded gains are. So it would have been nice to have more education early on, and also recognize that like if you put too much money in it in a year, like you can't go over the maximum, but if you put more than you spend, oh well, because it carries over year to year. So just keep letting that build and compound, and it's only going to serve you later in life.
Start early, invest or save what you can, let it roll over year. That's outstanding. All right, I'm going to ask the same question to you, Lance, and then you, Julie, if that'd be all right.
Yeah. I would probably say just the benefit of an HSA and how important and impactful it could be. You know, when I first got hired and reading, you know, the long list of benefits that we have, HSA being one of them, it was just like, oh, that's cool, a health savings account. Not knowing, you know, how impactful it could be in your life whenever medical bills do pile up or something unexpected happens, or the fact that you can use it for investments. Right. So if I would have known that earlier on, I kind of would have hopped on board earlier on and, you know, just be a little bit ahead of where I am now.
Appreciate you sharing that, Lance. Thank you. And closing us out, Julie.
Okay. I remember when my parents retired, and I remember, you know, they were pretty fiscally conscious. And I remember my mom saying, wow, I didn't realize how much my, you know, healthcare costs were on retirement. I did a great job planning in my 401k, but my benefits side. And, you know, this was before I had even started with an HSA. But I remember that sticking, and I had traditionally either been on HMOs or PPO plans. And, you know, those aren't plans that are designed to build your investments over time. So when you retire, right, there is going to be a period of potential gap where you are, you know, Medicare eligible or not. Maybe you work that long. I don't know. But either way, I knew that I wanted to have a vehicle that I could control, that I was, you know, in the driver's seat for. And HSAs did that. And not only did it do that, but it also allowed me to have, you know, my employer contributions. It allowed me to maximize my, you know, my ability to put into it. So it really just put me more in control of my own healthcare destiny. And to me, that's something that I want control of. And so for me, it was maybe not demystifying something or having any aha moment. It was just really about thinking over the long term and what was the best vehicle, and the best vehicle for myself. And I think it could be the best vehicle for others too, if they really start to look at all of the power in an HSA. That's just it.
Yeah, that's so good. I love, like, every advice was a little similar, but a little different. And again, that's the beauty of this podcast and why we were so passionate on bringing participants. So HR employers, if you are listening, right? One thing I heard was, I wish I just would have known more. I wish I would have known more. And so I know you've got a million things on your plate as an HR pro. You're a revolving door of questions. And so my employee, this is what we think about every day. We've got the HSA Day site that Nathan talked about, every powerful resource around HSA to help your participants figure what it is, how to use it, what's right for them. We've aggregated for you, right? So hit the easy button, check out the HSA Day page you put together, or Google. I don't care who you go to, whether it's us or somebody else. The information is out there, resources out there. Empower your employees to really have their eyes open and see the power that is an HSA. I'm off my soapbox, but I think that's why I get so passionate about this great stuff. So
that is a wonderful soapbox to stand on, Eric, and thank you for saying those things. I know that that's an important thing for our employers out there to hear. So, and I want to take this opportunity to thank you, our panelists, for joining us today. Whether as an HSA expert, an investor, a saver, a spender, somebody who's up and coming with the HSA, I know that your insights are going to resonate with some of our listeners, and I know that the right listener is going to hear what they need to hear from you today. To our listeners, thank you for tuning into our special HSA Day episode. As always, if you'd like to leave us a review or share other topics that interest you, please email us at benefits.buzz@wexinc.com. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks, everyone.